Russian occupants have captured the largest in Europe, Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. The occupied cities are on the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe. Ukrainians marry despite the state being engulfed in war. The Russia's war against Ukraine has been going on. You're listening to the UA, The Day That We Survived podcast. Ukrainian journalists have come together with ordinary people who record themselves and send us the audio to create this project. On the 3rd of March, 47 people died as a consequence of airstrikes on Chernihiv residential areas. The ancient city in the north of Ukraine was first mentioned in 907. In comparison, the first record of Moscow is dated during 1147. Chernihiv is under constant shelling. The news from other cities does not bring any joy either. There is constant fighting in the south of Ukraine. Russians managed to take over a number of cities, which became the cause of a humanitarian catastrophe. The mayor of Kherson, Ihor Kolykhayev, reports that the Russian military does not allow trucks carrying humanitarian aid to pass. Instead, they occupied the local TV tower and plan to broadcast their propaganda. But will people believe them? In Volnovakha, a town near the front line, fights are breaking out between our defenders and the Russian occupiers, while approximately 3,000 people remain there. A maritime city, Mariupol, has been under shelling without any way to communicate, without electricity, water and heating for 4 days. There are no more intact windows in the city. People in occupied Melitopol and Kherson keep protesting. Russian occupants took control of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant on the 4th of March. Because of the constant shelling done by the occupants, a fire broke out in the vicinity of the power plant's training complex. It was localized, however, costing 3 soldiers their lives.
Русский корабль! Иди
нахуй! Это пресса. Это пресса.
Русский корабль! Иди нахуй!
Ukraine asks to establish a no-fly zone. We address the whole world, requiring their understanding and support. However, NATO refuses to do so, since it might cause the war to expand to the whole European continent. We received 2 recordings from the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv. Fierce fights are still going on. Alexandra and her family did not leave the capital. Here is her story.
The usual things have changed. Instead of a morning cup of coffee, I get a phone in my hand with many messages. I make calls to find out the conditions of relatives and friends in different parts of the country to see if they survived the night at all. Instead of the usual announcements in the subway like, beware, the doors are closing, the next station is, the metro now announces only the air alarm, the sound of the siren, which makes the blood freeze in the veins. Instead of thinking what I'm gonna do next weekend, I now only make plans on how to spend the next night, how to reach the bomb shelter, arrange a corridor space, and how to ensure security from the windows in the best way possible. The night becomes the worst time of the day, because in the middle of it you hear every sound even better. You wake up from any noise. You notice some echoes from the other part of the city, and you don't know what that is. You do not understand. Is it our guys? Is it the enemy? What's going on? You just hear it, listen, and wait. The actions of the occupiers don't make any sense at all. They are shelling civilians, damaging maternity hospitals, schools, kindergartens. This must be stopped. It is simply impossible to watch the news, but you also cannot watch anything else. You just can't. You cannot receive any third-party information. Only news, only fresh updates. And that's because your loved ones are all scattered across the country. You already understand that some of them will definitely not be able to return to normal life. My mother's brother no longer has a wife or an apartment. That's in the town of Horodyanka. I don't know what is military in that town. My colleague no longer has any housing. Her apartment is one of those apartments on Lobanovsky Street, which was destroyed by Russians. Fortunately, the family is alive because they were in a bomb shelter. Every air alarm announcement in any part of Ukraine is simply insane. This horror must be stopped. The sky must be closed. We all hold on and believe in our extraordinary guys and that the truth is behind us. Glory to Ukraine!
Mikita and his wife met the first day of war out in the countryside and immediately stumbled in the middle of the crisis. They're staying in Kyiv now.
My wife and I, we were at our summer house when the bombing started, so obviously it was difficult for us to orientate ourselves as to our family members and what to do. First thing we did is contact our close ones and trying to understand what happened. While the bombing continued, we were stuck outside of Kyiv, about 20 kilometers away. And we're stuck there for a few days because the bombings were quite close to us and there was a lot of military activity around Kyiv. After a few days, we had a chance to jump back to Kyiv and to decide what to do next, helping out our close ones to leave Kyiv with their kids and mothers and sisters and etc. Then we decided to join local defense support militia, or you would call it, to give them support in any way we can, like food, vehicles, some simple funding, or whatever tasks they would need. We tried to help out. Luckily, at the same time, we had a chance to stay at an apartment in Kyiv where we spend our nights. Obviously, we don't have too much difficulties with simple supplies like food and everything we need. And day after day, we just do what we can to help out. There's not much point of us leaving Kyiv. Our parents are in Kyiv, and leaving them is not an option as well. So just keep supporting day by day and do what we can do, and don't think of much anything else. And just waiting for everything to be over and at least have some positive outcome at some point. The bombing continues, and the problem is actually not so much when it escalates, but when it stops, because then you sit and wait when it's going to escalate again. We all understand that's the tactics of pressuring and the psychology pressure to the minds of people. But the mistake is it's kind of working the other way around. It makes us more aggressive, more, I would say, concentrated. Our wife and I, we feel obviously that we don't exactly comprehend what is exactly happening. This will happen afterwards. But nevertheless, we're keeping strong. We're positive and hoping less civilians get hurt by these actions. And at least children don't get impacted as much as possible. And international support is really helpful. It motivates, and we feel that it's at least somewhat humanity's keeping adequate attitude towards what's happening. It's really helpful. So really appreciated by everyone. And Slava Ukraini! Героям слава!
Over 1 million of Ukrainian refugees have left the country. Women and children took their most important belongings, left their families, and abandoned their houses. Some of them already have no place to go back to. It is hard for us to watch how our cities are being destroyed. Watching people die is even harder. We don't really understand what Vladimir Putin wants from our country, since we all have lived our ordinary lives up until the 24th of February. We continue to fight, and merely among our acquaintances, a few couples conducted their weddings in the last couple of days. Thus, life and love will triumph.